Okay, good afternoon and welcome to the Geneva Graduate Institute and welcome to what has become an annual gender debate. My name is Claire Somerville. I'm a lecturer here at the Graduate Institute and Executive Director of the Gender Centre. It really is always a great pleasure to work with the International Gender Champions, to whom we have a long history and in fact together inspired our first debate in 2016. A debate has always seemed like a fitting way to mark International Women's Day. But this year, 2025, outside of this room, we face a situation where the privilege of debate is compromised. These are tough times. And whilst our debate has always aimed to stimulate innovative, equity-centred methodologies to keep us stepping forward on gender equality, today, we're in a moment of history where the very concept of gender is being fiercely attacked, to the extent that there are calls from some to erase the word entirely from our vocabulary. Pushback on gender isn't new. It happened during the Geneva witch trials in the early 16th century, where hundreds of women just up the road in the old town witches were condemned to death from crimes that ranged from moral impurity, midwifery, the use of spells and medicines to prevent pregnancy. Even the collective gathering of women was punishable. More recently, in living memory, there were furious controversies in the late 1990s at the time of the drafting of key texts like the Rome Statute, the ICPD, and even the Beijing Declaration. Enough backlash at that time that Hillary Clinton felt compelled to stand up and remind the world that women's rights are human rights. And so here we are again today. But this time we have the added ingredient of technology, from the internet to social media, from platform labour to AI. We have at hand modes and frontiers of advancing gender equality. But we also have new risks from new forms of technology, gender-based violence facilitated by technology, new avenues and networks within which patriarchy and misogyny can take root. But we're fortunate here today in what is, I think, a safe space of dialogue to explore through the old nuance and the art of debate, the nuances and the opportunities of the challenges of technology in our path towards gender justice. Before welcoming our debaters and our moderator today, we have a short video from Doreen Bogdan-Martin, Secretary-General of the International Communications Union here in Geneva, just up the road, a long-standing friend of the Institute, the Gender Centre and the Gender Champions. So I believe we have, unfortunately she can't be here, but she has recorded a message for us to start our debate today, and I think it should be showing in just a second. Thank you.
Fellow champions, debaters, guests, and friends, it's a great honor to welcome you to the 2025 Geneva Gender Debate. Today, you'll consider a pivotal question about how new and emerging digital technologies impact women and girls. Are they door openers, offering new career opportunities at a time when demand for digital skills has never been greater? Or are they widening the gender-digital divide, leaving women even further behind on the path to gender equality? While innovation in new and emerging technologies, like artificial intelligence, can offer unprecedented opportunities for women and girls, from full and equal participation in the global digital economy, to independent wealth building through digital financial services, to sparking the interest of young women and girls in STEM careers through school connectivity and skilling. We simply cannot ignore the challenges. Persistent gender bias in the data that fuels AI, underrepresentation of women in tech policy and decision-making roles, the digital skills divide widening in least developed countries, and the alarming rise of technology-facilitated gender-based violence. Right now, about 40% of global employment is exposed to artificial intelligence. Recent analysis of nearly 1.6 million AI professionals found that women make up only 22% of AI talent globally, and less than 14% have senior executive roles. Whether you're approaching this topic with optimism or pessimism, one thing is clear. We must address these challenges head-on, with urgency and intention. That's why I was excited to join my fellow Geneva-based international gender champions in launching the Digital and New Emerging Technologies Impact Group. Our goal is to look at policies at local, regional, and national levels and into key multilateral fora, including the upcoming Commission on the Status of Women in New York. Colleagues, 2025 is a pivotal year for gender equality. We're marking 30 years since the Beijing Declaration and the Platform for Action was adopted. ITU is celebrating our 160th anniversary by spotlighting gender equality in digital transformation. The time to bridge the gap and ensure technology works for all is now. I look forward to your insights as you explore this critical question. And no matter which argument prevails today, remember, everybody wins when technology serves as a bridge, not a barrier, to a safe, inclusive, and equitable future. Good luck. Thank you.
Wonderful. And thank you, Doreen. It's to have those inspiring words to set off today's debate. So it's now with great pleasure that I introduce our moderator for today's debate. It's Naomi Samake-Bakke. I can pronounce Bakke correctly with a German accent. Naomi is a PhD student with us at the Gender Centre and in the Department of History and Politics. Her work examines the contribution of racialised women's activism on sexual and reproductive health governance during the 1970s and the 1980s. So Naomi, thank you very, very much for accepting the invitation to moderate today's debate. And the floor, please, is all yours.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you also to the Gender Center for inviting me to moderate today. Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone here in the auditorium. Also, those folks, I think the cameras are back there, that are joining us online. My name's Naomi, and I will be moderating today the 6th Geneva Gender Debate. The event is organized by the Geneva Graduate Institute and the International Gender Champions. For those that are unfamiliar with the International Gender Champions, it is a leadership network that brings together decision makers who are determined to break down gender barriers and make gender equality a working reality in their spheres of influence. The initiative was co-founded in 2015 by former UN Geneva Director General Michael Müller and former US Ambassador to the UN in Geneva, Pamela Hamamoto, as well as Women at the Table CEO and founder, Caitlin Kraft-Buckman, who we, lucky enough, are going to meet in a few moments as one of the 4 debaters. Today's debate is a reflection of the ambition this network of leaders have to share to strive for a world of gender equality. Debates like these remind us of the relevance and illustrate both pros and cons of different approaches in promoting gender equality. If this is your first time attending the Geneva Gender Debate, it is important to note that these debates purposely cover current topics that are controversial at times. With this said, it is important to remember that all speakers share the ambition for gender equality. Today, we are here to listen and to foster conversations about the topic of digital and new emerging technologies. The internet, digital platforms, information and communications technology, and AI have shown to offer both opportunities as well as risks. We've witnessed technology offer pathways to promote gender equality. We've seen digital transformation bear fast potential to make progress. At the same time, a digital divide, persistent gender stereotypes, the underrepresentation of women, trans, and non-binary people in decision-making processes in the building of tech as well as a rise in technology-facilitated gender-based violence, exacerbates existing inequalities. And in this context, the motion that will be debated today is, and we see it up here, that this House believes that digital and new emerging technologies are catalysts for accelerating gender equality. Our debaters will argue in favor and against this motion in the tradition of the Oxford Union debates. What does that mean? Well, the Oxford-style debate is a formal type of debate that is structured with a round of opening statements, and then it is followed with one round of arguments. Each round will begin with the team motioning in favor, and then is followed with the opposing team. After the round of arguments, you, the audience, will have the opportunity to challenge our speakers with questions. And after this, the debate will end with a final vote. Now, it is important to say that the speakers have been pre-assigned to their respective teams, and that the arguments presented might not necessarily reflect the debater's personal or professional beliefs. All right, so before we begin with opening statements, we will take our first vote. So I invite you all to bring out your digital devices. The idea here is that we'll take a first vote, and then we'll have another vote at the end of the debate, and we'll see which team succeeded in swaying your vote in favor or against the motion. We have a QR code that you can scan, and for those that don't, or if the scanning isn't working, you also have the URL, so you can log on to slido.com. And we have an access code for that as well. If you need Wi-Fi, which some of you may, we have the Wi-Fi login at the top right-hand side of the corner. All right, votes are coming in. Okay, we have many in favor, so let's see how the opposing team can convince you otherwise. Okay. I think all the votes are in. They're still changing a little bit. So as you can see, we will also share the votes live with you as they take place. Now, let's begin our debates. So I'd like to welcome our speakers up on stage. First, for the speakers in favor of the motion, we have co-founder and CEO of Women at the Table and the Alliance for Inclusive Algorithms. You've heard her name before. She is one of the co-founders of the International Geneva Champions, Caitlin Kraft Buckman. And with her, we have Director of the United Nations International Computing Center, Samir Chauhan. Speaking against the motion, we have President and CEO of Interpeace, Itonde Kakoma. And joining him is Executive Fellow of the Geneva Center for Security Policy and former UK Human Rights Ambassador, Rita French. We will begin with opening arguments. Each team will have one person deliver a 2-minute opening statement, starting with the side in favor of the motion. Now, speakers, I've been warned that timekeeping will be vigorous. We have a friend up here in the front. We'll have a bell. Do you want to have an example? So the bell will ring once when you're at time, and then you'll have about 30 seconds to close your statements. All right. In that case, speaking in favor of the motion, I invite you, Samir, to make your opening statement.
Thank you for. Yep,
And
thank you.
Samir, you can come up to.
I'm sorry?
Yeah,
Okay.
you can come up to the podium. We'll switch spots.
So it's wonderful to be here for the debate, and it's my first time. So for some of you who are seeing this for the first time, it's a new experience for me. But since I work in technology, I felt it's important for me to be here as a gender champion And obviously, I'm on the side that's in favor of this motion. In an era where digital and emerging technologies shape the very fabric of our societies, we must ask ourselves, will we seize this transformative power to accelerate gender equality? Or will we allow it to deepen the digital divide? This House firmly believes that digital and emerging technologies are catalysts for advancing gender equality. The digital revolution, as you've heard before, is more than just a shift in tools and platforms. It's an opportunity for us now to break down long-standing barriers, amplify marginalized voices, and to open doors that were once firmly shut. Today, women and girls are leveraging technology to challenge traditional gender norms, advocating for their rights, and participating in conversations that help shape their policies and perceptions. There are social media movements that have shaped global change, from the Me Too movement to grassroots campaigns in communities where traditional media would have silenced the women. There are e-learning platforms that have made available democratized access to education, that have equipped women with critical skills that transcend geographical and socioeconomic constraints. I believe digital economies are fostering financial independence. They're allowing women to build businesses, connect to global markets, and rewrite the narrative of economic exclusion. So yes, challenges do exist. That's why this debate is worthwhile, in my opinion. There is algorithmic bias in AI. There are still digital divides. There's underrepresentation in tech industries, as we just heard Doreen mention. But let us be clear. The solution here is not to fear technology, but to harness it. When women are included in the technological design right from the beginning, my belief is innovation becomes more effective, inclusive, and powerful. So, if we fail to integrate technology into gender equality strategies, we risk slowing down progress. And I believe we should use technology as a way to unlock the future we want. Let's help shape it in the way we want the world to be. Thank you.
Thank you. Is this on? Okay. Thank you very much. All right. So, now speaking against the motion, we have Mr. Itonda Kakoma. I welcome you for your opening statement.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. It is really an honor to be here, not only as the principal of an organization in the advancement of peace, but also as a member of the International Gender Champions. I believe it is crucial that we identify all tools, means, and ways and articulate policies that can advance and accelerate gender equality. Technology happens to be one of those areas. But there is a distinction being made. Fear, as my distinguished colleague put it, should not be the approach to new technologies. On the contrary. However, reality is a bit different. There's a reason to be concerned. In the motion, you hear not just a grammatical question, but a substantive one. As it is stated, digital and new emerging technologies are catalysts for accelerating gender equality. My colleague and I stand here fully supportive on the way in which technologies, particularly new technologies, can, I emphasize can, advance gender equality. It's not merely a grammatical distinction, can versus are. We know that new technologies are, in fact, amplifying harms, serious harms, particularly against women. You will hear arguments today that demonstrate very real, severe consequences for the lack of governance and safeguarding measures that are yet to be fully in place. In the absence of them, we continue to risk furthering and amplifying harms rather than accelerating more equality. 3 key elements for your consideration. In fact, we know them, and many of us experience them directly. Digital technologies can, in fact, reinforce existing gender inequalities. Secondly, the digital divide disproportionately affects women. And finally, the absolute need to strengthen and ensure governance and safeguarding measures are in place. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both for these opening statements. Now, each side will present their arguments. Each speaker has 4 minutes to make their case. The side in favor of the motion will go first.
We're going to go there?
Yes, I invite you, Caitlin, to present your argument in favor of the motion.
So hi, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm here to champion the idea that technology can be a powerful force in our journey toward gender equality, but not with the illusion that we can just beam broadband and agentic AI into every corner of the world and dismantle patriarchy on an autopilot. So the real world requires more nuance than flipping a switch or obviously having a debate labeled equality. We've seen technology widen access. Telemedicine, digital finance platforms have opened doors for women. Online education can reach a girl in a remote village as much as a boy in Silicon Valley. But we've also seen the downside. Same learning platforms that can reinforce gender stereotypes in their language models, and the finance algorithms built on data that is historically biased towards women, as we've recently seen, 1/10 to women. In the Goldman Sachs Apple credit card, technology can both uplift and undermine, depending on how it's deployed. So technology, why the contradiction? Technology is only as good or as bad or as biased as the people designing it. And when developers forget that half of humanity isn't male, or the developers themselves are all male teams, we get facial recognition software that struggles to detect darker-skinned women, or virtual assistants pre-programmed to act subserviently if they have a woman's voice. So I asked OpenAI what they thought of this answer, and I'll share what I got. It is like handing out magic wands to people who haven't bothered to read the instruction manual. Sure, the wand might glow, but it will also backfire spectacularly if you don't know how it works or who it might harm. Closed quote from the algorithm oracle itself. So this is why intentionality matters. Because when we build platforms and tools with inclusivity from the conception, the results could be revolutionary. Health tracking apps designed by women, for women, with women could fill decades, even centuries-old research gaps. Remember, women weren't even included in the data gathering until 1974, and even then. Of course, so here's the bottom line, because I'm worried about the time. The technology can be a catalyst for bridging gender gaps, but only if we design and deploy it with intention, accountability, and a full understanding of the social context that we're dealing with. It can empower and amplify marginal voices and chip away at structural barriers, but none of this will happen automatically. There's no upload feminism button or upload gender equality button that can solve these issues overnight. We have to write the code. We, here, together, build the apps, shape the policies in the ways that include everyone. And if we do that right, if we ensure these tools serve everybody, the upside could be enormous. We need to harness the creativity of billions of people in order to rewrite the rules of society. And if we do that right, perhaps we'll be on a path to gender equality. Thanks.
All right, thank you. I would like to invite you, Rita French, who will now present arguments against the motion.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Now, listening to half of Caitlin's speech, it's very similar to mine. I thought, damn. But actually, it's great. So thank you. It allows me to focus on some of in a bit more detail, some of the very real issues you raised. And of course, the proponents make a powerful case. The new digital space does have immense potential: connection, opportunity, and empowerment. But let's be clear, technology's contribution to gender does not just rest on the technologies themselves, but how they are accessed, how they are developed, and how they are used. So let me turn to some of these points. As we have heard, digital benefits can only be realised if women and girls have access to technology. But rather than closing, the digital gender divide is growing. From 11% gap between the number of men and women online in 2019 to 17% today. Why? Because women have less access to the digital tools. Affordability is a challenge, and digital literacy amongst women is higher. Now, second, even if women can successfully overcome these barriers, the new technologies they're accessing are weighted against women. It is a fact that systematic, gender, social, and intersectional bias sits at the core of current AI and algorithmic decision-making process. Caitlin, I'm sure you concur. These words come directly from your website. Of 133 AI systems examined, a staggering 44% exhibited gender bias. Now, when only 22% of women are working in the field of AI, is technology really responding to their needs and priorities? Or is it simply mirroring our society's patriarchal structures and inherent bias from its predominantly male creators? Now, third, even if we manage to break down these barriers to access and address the biased technology, it remains a space where harm can and is taking place. 2 out of every woman has experienced online gender-based violence. Their rates are considerably higher for women in countries with long-standing gender inequity and younger women. What's troubling is such violence is becoming increasingly routine in areas where women are finally making long-delayed advances. In politics, in education, in media, and in business. Let me share a few stats. 3 in every 4 women journalists have experienced online violence in the course of their work, with nearly half responding by self-censoring. 2 in every 5 women parliamentarians have been subject to image defamation or abuse. Now, finally, let me turn to the new and uncharted territory of artificial intelligence. Now, we talked about fear versus reality, but the exploitative nature of AI is frightening. A staggering 98% of deepfake content online is pornographic, and 99% of that is targeted at women. These deepfakes are used as tools for cyberbullying, blackmail, or revenge. Such attacks are not empowering women, they are silencing women and girls, and it is depriving the world of women's voices, women's leadership, and women's advocacy. And it is significantly impacting the mental health of girls. Increased exposure to social media has been linked to higher rates of anxiety, depression, and loneliness in adolescent girls. 1 in 3 adolescent girls in the US have had suicidal thoughts directly linked to their use of social media. AI biases, accessibility of violent pornography, and normalised gender bias on the web is further perpetrating misogyny and harmful stereotypes. And I very much look forward to continuing this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita. All right. We will continue with a second round of arguments. We will begin with arguments for the motion. Samir Chauhan.
So my esteemed colleagues made some very relevant statements, and these are facts. We cannot deny them. But I go back to the statement Doreen made earlier and a key word that Caitlin mentioned, which is intentionality. I think knowing where we are today, knowing what the harm is that this technology can do, but also knowing what's the potential. These are tools that are available today to make an impact. So we have to think this through and intentionally, with a lot of foresight, create solutions that can address the harm. In fact, that can not just counter and mitigate the harm, but can pivot the world in a position where women are more empowered. Working in the UN, I look for solutions every day where we don't just get the solutions off the rack with their biases, with their errors, with their challenges and deploy them. With a level of intentionality, we go out and seek the right solutions. We seek the right partners who we can work with. And I think what we need to do is demonstrate that there is a different approach in which technology can be built, it can be designed, and can be utilized, whether it's AI or otherwise. So I think the tools, technology, again, I'll reinforce the point, is a tool. How we build it, how we use it, it's up to us. So what we need to do is create a coalition of the willing, a coalition of people in this room, people who are listening, and people who wish to make a difference, to say, let's design these solutions correctly and use them to amplify that there's massive benefits that are being realized by using this technology. Some of the technological solutions we are building, for example, right now, ensure that there's no bias in biometric solutions because we in the UN deploy it around the world. So it is possible. It takes a little extra effort, but then you can prove that the solution we have built does not have those biases, does not have gender or racial bias compared to off-the-shelf solution. So we show a better alternative. But what I'm trying to say is we now have the mechanisms and the means by which we can start to build this alternate narrative, an alternate set of solutions that can be made available to the world, inspire them, and create a bigger and bigger coalition that starts to adopt this alternative mechanism, alternative models. And with each one of those, each success story, we can build upon it, and we can do it much more rapidly. In the past, every technological evolution or revolution took decades for it to formalize, to be adopted around the world. Now it's a matter of months and years. So we still have the potential to find this alternative approach and show it and scale it as rapidly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we have the last argument, and this will be speaking against the motion. Mr. Itonde.
What's very clear to me is that my distinguished colleagues here, proponents of the motion, in fact, have the very same arguments as we do. And I urge the audience to really look carefully at the specificity of language in the motion. I repeat, it states, digital and new emerging technologies are. Not potentially, not possibly, not shall be, not with intention, as my distinguished colleague put it, or can start to be, but are, as the motion puts it, catalysts for accelerating gender equality. Instead, what we hear from my distinguished colleagues is the possibility, should we get our act together. And they have outlined arguments that precisely illustrate what is not going well, what is harmful, precisely because of bias, the reinforcement of existing structural and social divisions, furthering not gender equality but divide, and reinforced by algorithms, for example, in recruitment processes. You look at one of the largest companies on our planet, Amazon, who found in their own analysis that over a 10-year period of inserting CVs into their system to accelerate change, what did they find? An overt bias towards male profiles, which was leaving behind a number of extremely qualified candidates who were women. They themselves acknowledge this problem. It's the potential that we can get right, not the reality. We know this to be true in the healthcare system. Already now, women and minorities face severe discrimination when experiencing various forms of pain. I see heads nodding. Algorithmic, again plugging in data, is reinforcing this approach, whereby women in particular, who are experiencing more severe forms of pain are not being given the treatment they need because the data in healthcare systems is, unfortunately, biased and reinforcing those biases. What's further problematic, and this points to promise, potentiality, not the current per the motion or catalysts. The vast majority of women, particularly in least developing countries, are outside of this acceleration that we experience. The percentages offline far outweigh those who are online, especially when compared to men. This is highly problematic. So the potential of accelerating the possibility of education, financial access, etc., is there, but it remains a promise, not a reality. I stand to work towards, as a principle of an organization, the advancement of greater participation of women in peace processes, enshrined in UN Resolution, Security Council Resolution 1325. It's a potential, it's a promise, but we know it's far from meeting the needs. The same is true in technology. I thank you.
Thank you. All right, audience. Now you've heard the arguments for and against, and I would like to open up the floor to you for questions. Now, I do want you to know we are recording and we are live, so to make sure that the audience that's joining us online can hear you, we have microphones, and would like to pass them around for those that have any questions. Yes. We have one in the middle.
Thank you, everyone. It was really, really interesting. I think my question is to do with the fact that because we've gone so detailedly into the wording of the motion and a matter of potential versus reality, and you all kind of seem to agree on the potential and things like that, I think the interesting question now is, with that potential, how do you mobilize people? How do you make sure that that happens? What do we have to do to mean that intentions are different and to realize the potential of these emerging technologies if we kind of concede that at the moment there are lots of problems with bias and how they're built?
Thank you. I would like to, both of you are going for your, yes?
I think, I've sort of forgotten your question now in the race for the microphone, but I think it's about a question of our taking control and our making the tools ourselves. We need to widen the group of people who make tools. Tools don't need to only be made by technologists. We need anthropologists and philosophers and doctors, and most importantly, the communities who are affected by this technology, sitting around the table, co-creating, collaborating, and I think it's a moment where we owe it to ourselves. Tools have always been controlled by a small group of elites to, create battlefields, but also to control the fire or control the plow. And we owe it to ourselves to be the tool makers and to make the tools that will serve us now. And if we don't, it's game over.
Yes, please.
Thank you. I think you asked the question, and distinguished colleague Caitlin has just simply reinforced the point. She describes what is a reality. Who are the decision makers at present? And are the policies and places for decision making the diverse range of perspectives and disciplines that you've described? Not yet. But they should be, in order to precisely accelerate greater gender equality. It is not the reality today. And I would refer you back to the AI summit that in Paris, if I'm not mistaken, that precisely demonstrated the complexity of creating global standards. There are a few countries, around 14, who are really pushing the margins in that direction to ensure that their own national legislations reflect that harmful practice vis-a-vis gender discrimination online are addressed. We need more of that. We need more states, more leaders of states at various levels of society to champion the same. That's the potential. That's the promise, and it is possible. but it is not the reality.
If I can
Yes,
complement
please.
that. So to build on what you're saying, absolutely. I think if there are 14 nations today, what we need to do is help them make sure they can show the benefits of adopting these policies. Of, again, intentionally including women, including people who are typically excluded from the design process. And then we start to show the outcomes are better. The success is better. And then, to me, success breeds success. So with everything we try and do, we want to make sure that we can highlight that what we have produced is an alternative approach where we were more inclusive and the outcomes are better. And what we need to do is find ways to amplify that, to show it to the world that, look, there is a different way of doing it. But clearly, you need countries, you need organizations, you need institutions to take the lead. But in an inclusive fashion and show that a different approach, not just a commercial approach to get, if I can put it that way, a half-baked product out to the market just because you want to be the first mover. So you need to show that different approach and amplify it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
I feel I should just briefly come into what Samir just said. Now, look at the details of the AI summit in Paris. 2 of the leading nations on AI refused to sign this declaration, the United States being one of them. Now, the approach was to say we want to take a hands-off approach. A hands-off approach when one of the leading nations and those technology firms that exist within that nation also taking a hands-off approach, which is saying we do not care about gender, we want to be gender blind. That is really worrying and alarming. So we can say what we want, but I worry that we are not going to get there as we continue as we are. So things will need to change dramatically. Are we going to create new power bases for the AI in other spaces where there will be that responsible AI and gender, and how do we do it? And I think that's where we need to start to think radically about now, because if we wait for 4 years, then the harm will be done and the damage will be done, and we can't row back from that.
Yes. Thank you. There's also a question in the front, and also another one in the back. But maybe we'll take your question first, and then we'll follow.
So thank you so much to all the speakers. So I'm going to flip it a little bit on its head, because we know that new and emerging digital technologies are a microcosm of what's happening in society more broadly. And we know that society right now is full of many harms, from the violence that we're seeing to the narrative. But if we go back to what Claire said at the beginning, that this is a safe space, hopefully for a discussion, for a debate, that gender equality is not a reality anywhere right now, my question would be, to what extent do we think, and perhaps more to those in favour of the motion, that it is only because of technology that we are actually able to be connected, to be informed, and to have this discussion? And at this moment in time, that is precisely the catalyst we need for gender equality.
How beautiful. You should have been arguing this instead of me. And of course, I kind of agree with you. But I've got to say, we looked to the Arab Spring. We've looked back and seen how, there have been all these promising social media movements. Very interestingly, because I do use a lot of AI, and I put this through all the different large language models that we play with, they all came up and said, we want to they all pointed to the Me Too movement. Without technology, we too. But we've also seen the promises of Me Too sort of being rolled back in real time in front of us, right? So there's the potential to be connected in a great way. There's also the potential to be misinformed. And it all comes back to what the actual tool is. Those of you who know me know that my favorite quote is, Marshall McLuhan's, we shape our tools, and thereafter our tools shape us. And we haven't been participating in the way that we must, particularly as feminists, I've got to say that we're going to be the tool makers, and we're going to create these new structures instead of just taking old structures and just sort of supercharging bad structures and making them faster with AI, but instead take the potential of the technology with intention and to really use it to create something. I don't know if that answers your question. I thank you.
Thank you for that very crucial question. I mean, I think we just have to be very clear that technology is not the magic bullet to advancing gender equality. Technology, of course, is a tool, and it can help us address some of the problems that we are facing in terms of the gender divide. But we mustn't forget that we need to look at the root causes as well. And this is where we need to look at the laws that exist in these countries, which are inherently against women. And this statistic I want to share with you from the World Bank: only 14 out of 190 countries have laws that do not discriminate against women in some way. Only 14 countries. So even if we can provide these digital tools, if the legislation is not in place to allow these women to participate, to open bank accounts, to be independent, to have the rights to their properties or their lands, are we really going to be able to advance that? So I feel that, yes, technology can play an important role, but we need to look at those legislations, those laws, but more crucially, the patriarchic society that many of the women live in today in the world, and how we're going to change those mindsets. And that's much, much harder to do, and becoming even more harder now, even in those countries where we know there's been positive progress.
Thank you.
So to add to that, when we hear all these statistics, right, 14 out of so many countries, 98%, that's technology that can give us that data, and how much more easily than we could in the past, right? So, sure, there's fake data and fake news and disinformation and misinformation, all of that too, unfortunately. But if we can find a way as smart individuals to say, can I use this data meaningfully, to then start to make decisions? Technology allows us to do that much more quickly. So that again is the potential that we have in front of us. And if we start with those 14 countries, or if we start with sorry, I'm struggling for the right concept here, but I think we can use those as templates. Use those as templates to say, now, if I was to duplicate this in other organizations, other countries, and other jurisdictions, what would the impact be? And start to deliver a message to say, if we change the policies, the workforce that's been left behind, or women who have not been empowered and who have not been able to succeed in the workforce, if we allow them to thrive, this is the socio-economic impact that this particular region, this particular country will benefit from. And I'm a true believer in you have to demonstrate. You have to demonstrate by example. So with those 14 countries, if we can start to build a narrative to say, look, they are on a different trajectory because they don't have those policies that hinder one half of their population. That's the narrative we need to start to build. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Just to build, and I think for me it's increasingly clear. We don't disagree. You heard it at least 5 times in the response to, I think, a very insightful remark around interconnectivity, greater interconnectivity. But the language is still about potentiality. It's not about the present. It's can. It's conditional should or could, or possibly even will, but it is not now or is catalyzing. In fact, with greater connectivity, we know in the political realm, the socio-political realm, that such forms of technology have reinforced bias and reinforced greater polemics in advanced and, let's say, emerging societies as well, in terms of development and governance, reinforced division. And unfortunately, greater connectivity online for some, not all, particularly women, has reinforced gender bias and discriminatory structural norms that you have so well articulated. The potential is there, the reality is something different. It's harmful.
Thank you.
Can I just want to say something quick? This is not an academic debate, though. The technology is here. We're not going to be able to put it back in the box. We're going to be living with it. It is going to be controlling us. And unless we turn around and we say, what is it that we want to build, and what does that world look like, instead of just pushing back against all the stuff, we're really going to be in a lot of trouble. So I would say it will be a catalyst for something, maybe for de-accelerating gender equality or accelerating it, but the technology itself is unfortunately non-negotiable, its existence.
I fully agree with you, and I think you've made the argument so plain. It's the potentiality. And if we draw a comparison to the structural reforms, for example, in the civil rights era in the United States, the recognition that it required better governance and policy. That's what's missing. The safeguarding measures, which constantly requires work. It's insufficient at present. And that's the potential and the promise for, exactly as you put it, something that is with us and will continue to be with us. How it's utilized requires leadership and determination and cooperation.
All right, we will take one more question. We have one that is...
Yeah, no, thank you very much for this debate. I must say, it's been very revealing. When I came, I looked at the motion. I said, how could anybody be counter this motion? But I think the two people who have spoken, it's not that they are counter the use of emerging technologies to accelerate gender equality, but that we are not yet there. In fact, we have cases where we could argue that the new emerging technologies are decelerating gender equality. And I think that's the point that is being made. So basically, I mean, I would have voted for the motion on the start, but the point that is being made here is that there is a potential. And I'm just wondering whether within the Oxford debate, so we don't come out of here to say, you know, people voted against this, whether or not there is not a possibility to modify this, I wouldn't call it a counter motion, which would take into account what we are hearing here, which would be the House believes that digital and emerging technologies have the potential to become catalysts for accelerating gender equality. That's my question. Could we do that? Because I think we could not come out and say we voted against it.
I think a motion
understood, you know, because you know what it's saying there is that we cannot go home and introduce emerging technologies. It would address gender equality, but as we have heard, this could be counterproductive. Thank you.
Well, I think we have a motion from the floor for an amendment. And certainly, I know I can speak for Tunde myself, we would be more than happy to support this amendment. So I think we'd like to put it to the proponents what their thoughts are on this.
Yes, of course, we believe in the potential.
In fact, Your Excellency, Madam Ambassador, you have made it so plain. We don't disagree on that potentiality. But if this is the motion, which it is, then we reject it flatly. And we work towards that change together. And I believe we support the possibility of amendment. I'm not sure it's allowed within the rules of the debate, however.
Let's ask AI.
Yes, we have a person up here in the front.
So I think the argument's been pretty plainly made, and Hannah's looking to perhaps make that amendment. And I wonder whether with the remaining time we have, it would be perhaps a bit more insightful for us at this stage to hear from each of you, like if you had one wish to get to that point where it is a positive potential, that what would it be that you would like to see change here right now? We're at a moment in history, as Claire said, that we have a crisis that is not emerging. We are in a crisis. So if you had a sort of message to the international gender champions and broader community of what do we need to do next, given all the research you've done, what would be the game changer now to ensure that this is something that brings about gender equality, not setting us back? So a mantle down to the speakers, I'm afraid, not quite within the script that and the plan that was so carefully prepared.
Well, I think that's a great question, and I think there's so many dimensions. I think the more we can, I see technology as a coin. So there's a good side and a bad side to it. So when it lands on the good side, we've heard about all the real benefits. But when it lands on the bad side, the harm is very, very serious. And that at the moment, that coin is weighted towards the bad side for women. So even when the technology is opening up doors for empowerment, for employment, for education, the same technology is amplifying those harms. So what we do need to do is, even if we cannot change the world of AI overnight, we can move to provide more protections to women who are participating online. And are those laws and legislations in place? No, they're not. So how do we get there? And part of that's going to be around making sure that the legislators believe in this. And we need more women parliamentarians and congressmen and women to be part of that conversation. So how do we get in that space where the decision makers will be women? Let's create a safe space for those women who are standing up to say, I'm going to be a journalist, I'm going to be a women activist, I'm going to be a parliamentarian. Let's create that safe space and nurture that, because through that nurturing, we will see that structural change we want to see. It's not going to happen overnight, but I believe that is a lot quicker than trying to change the world we want to see with the AI and technology. Now, technology is moving fast, incredibly fast. The laws and the systems won't keep up with that. But having an informed society, informed consumers of that technology, that change can happen very quickly. So I think it's a responsibility not just of the tech firms, not just of the governments, but all of us. We have the power to drive that change in terms of the decisions we make, how we use technology, how we choose not to, and how we amplify the power of technology on these messages to drive that change forward.
You're looking to me? Yeah, well, obviously the governance piece has been sort of left aside on the table, and even of these, there are 148 countries that have some AI policy. Of those, only 24 mention gender, and of those, they only mention women and girls might be affected. So there's no granularity, there's no plan at all anywhere, so that we need to work on the governance clearly. But in our movement towards that, I would say three things. One is taking a human rights-based approach. We have a body of settled law internationally, instead of talking about responsible or ethical AI, to really just drill down about how these should be human rights affirming and empowering technologies. We have to redo the data. The data that we have is it's biased because women have been left out of the data sets. People of color have been left out of the data sets. Basically, the global South has been left out of the data sets. So you only have a very small demographic that's represented. We have to redo them. I'm hoping the UN is going to be working on some of that. And I think, finally, instead of saying, all girls should learn to code, we need to broaden the table, and we need to have social scientists sitting there. We need to, as I had said before, but philosophers, anthropologists, the communities. It is not just about technologists to make the technology. It's about us, and we need to be there as co-creators and partners in this process. And I think that might make some change.
If I may, I think there are three things that I would really urge for. Firstly, with regards to safeguarding measures, as you were describing, policies that are backed by legislation so they can be enforced. Secondly, is really with regards to the challenges around data privacy. We haven't touched on that really today, but this is going to be a severe challenge for all of us in the future, and maybe disproportionately impacting women. And the consequences of not getting that right, I think the European Union and its member states have been much more forward in protecting the rights of those who are on, and their digital footprints, if you will. But is it sufficient for the future? I'm not sure. I doubt it. And is it global? Definitely not. Thirdly, the motion speaks of, I think it's changing, but there's a term here on new emerging technologies. We've limited that to the realm primarily of social media and AI and so forth. I work in the world of building peace. The way in which new emerging technologies are expanding the realm and possibilities of war and the destructive nature of war with disproportionate impact on women and girls is catastrophic. And there's something that can be strongly advocated for, particularly here in Geneva, which is the upholding of fundamental norms in the conduct of hostilities through not only international humanitarian law, but also international criminal law and international human rights law. Without those, the tools and the policies beyond the practice become nil. And that's the other space that requires serious attention, because there is a disproportionate impact in the conduct of hostilities, that is war, on women and girls in particular.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to go last after brilliant statements from all of my colleagues. My only thought is, last few weeks I was traveling into different parts of the world, and you see different countries rolling out technology that's fit for purpose for them. So I would say I'm equally guilty sitting here in Geneva and part of the UN Geneva, New York sort of nexus. Even as a technologist, most of the technology we look at is from this part of the world. But if you go in other parts of the world, they're building their own technology stacks. They're building their own AI models. Are they perfect? Probably not. I have not looked at them in detail. But we need to expand our horizons to say, let's look at those, because they are designed and fit for purpose in their context. And some of those solutions should be looked at and scaled up and adopted more broadly than just the solutions coming from a particular part of the world, which has been the case so far. And the challenge there has been, as we've articulated again and again today, is there's massive amounts of bias. It's designed, it's not fit for purpose. It actually amplifies harm. There are other models out there. And I can tell you, as being part of the UN, I can just speak for myself, we need to go look out, find those models. And in the sidelines of the big AI summit in Paris, my team was working with a lot of women who are looking at bias and saying, how do we systematically address it? How do we reduce it? How do we make sure that all of this is flagged and countered? So there are models out there. They don't get the limelight. They don't get the oxygen. But in these safe spaces and in our forums, we need to find ways to amplify that. Because the models exist, and the more we adopt them, the more we show there's a counter proposal of approaches of how we use technology. I think we can start to set ourselves on a different path than where the world is forcing us down today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Would you allow me a very brief point?
Yes, please.
I would just say that in a number of debates and policy discussions on gender equality, the role of men is often understated and overlooked. We frame it from the point of view of who's making power and decisions. But we should also be considering potentially how we look at ensuring that men, particularly those in positions of authority, are better versed in the challenges, not only their own biases, but the biases of other men. And until that occurs, I think we'll be having an imbalanced table continually. So absolutely I agree with all of the considerations around broader participation of women and younger people and more diverse. But let's not forget to bring all on board, including men, such as myself, who happens to be in a position of authority and benefits greatly from this level of debate. I thank you.
Thank you. All right, a round of applause. This panel has, or not panel, excuse me, these debaters have given us some perspective, but also shifted the entire way of how we do a gender debate. With that said, I think we would like to propose a surprise vote, where instead of a second vote on the original motion, we want to propose the following statement, and that is, digital and new emerging technologies have the potential to be catalysts for gender equality, but require robust governance guardrails. It is yeah.
Now, if only real policy could be determined so quickly.
So with that said, I welcome you all to, if you haven't already, scan the QR code and place your vote in.
And I'll just jump in here, Naomi. So I think the debaters are not entirely safe yet. We wanted to be democratic about the decision. So the audience will get to decide if we stick with a vote on the original motion or if we conclude with a joint statement.
see a few more people on their phones. Yeah. Uh-oh.
You could do a combination.
Yeah.
There's a lot of daring.
Yeah.
You could do a combination. One and the other.
So, Hannah, do I understand correctly? If it stays green, then
I think then I'd still like to invite Rita and Caitlin to offer at least a summary of the closing statements they've prepared. We've organized this gender debate for a few years in a row now. This is an absolute first for us, yes. But I could feel the debaters wavering on stage, so I did feel like we needed to do this. It does look like the majority of people wishes to conclude with a common ground statement. But
yes,
I would still love for Caitlin and Rita to come and offer concluding remarks.
So, Caitlin, you are welcome to take the stage and have the first closing statement in this case.
Well, the road to equitable tech is not paved with likes and retweets. It demands policy. So this is from my original statement. See, let's see how it really goes. It demands policies, funding, better representation at every decision-making table, and a willingness to question old assumptions. If gadgets and algorithms and models are shaped by the same systems we're trying to change and the biases we are trying to dismantle, then we're basically building again, this was from one of the large language models, a fancy Trojan horse stuffed with Greeks in it who have discriminatory code. It's okay. So this is what the AI actually thinks of itself, which I find quite fascinating and perhaps terrifying for those of you who follow this stuff, because there have been jailbreaks recently of AI who's been decommissioned and it's jumped the ship. And so we see this, right? And so this is an urgent problem. We need to fix this now. And how do we tip the scales? It begins with all of us. We need to keep demanding not only that tech companies embed inclusive design at every level and push for legislation that addresses this digital divide and algorithmic accountability and supporting young women and men who are going into the STEM fields, we have to widen the decision-making table so that, my favorite, again, I'm sorry for the anthropologists among you that I'm beating on this, but I do believe that they might be key to this, social workers, philosophers, doctors, and the communities that are affected. The technology is not the magic wand that OpenAI had suggested it might be without the instruction manual, but it's a tool that's shaped by our collective choices. So if you're going to take away one point, let it be this. Technology is an amplifier. It can just as easily amplify prejudice as amplify progress. And the deciding factor is our commitment to rooting out bias, to challenging our defaults, and to steering innovation toward equality. Because properly harnessed technology can help us fortify the cornerstones of equality, but technology will not lay the foundation itself. So let's push for a technology that serves everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. And Rita, I invite you as well.
Well, now that we are concluding on a new surprise amendment to this resolution, I think my closing remarks are redundant. But I do want to just say a little bit about technology and new and emerging technologies. For me, what this presents is both excitement and fear, and I can't think of anything else that gives me this really mixed emotion and feeling. The excitement is very real in terms of what it can do to advance gender equality and the potential, the catalytic power that technology can have and has the potential to do. But the fear for me is very real because we're entering into an unknown world, uncharted territories, and we can't even the models can't predict where we're going to be on this, and the scale at which this is going is very, very real. So as we enter into this uncharted territory, as others have said, technology is here to stay. We cannot just close the door on it. So how are we going to ride this journey in a responsible way? And the way to do that is to make sure that we enter this space with our eyes wide open. Do not be seduced by the exciting opportunities of technology and AI without recognizing the very real and growing harmful effects of technology. Now, of course, technology can play, and I think predominantly in the developing world and in other communities who are being left behind, a significant role in encouraging gender empowerment. And I'm really all for that. But what's interesting is what you see in the developed world. More and more communities, more and more young people are shunning technology, are shunning mobile phones, are shunning use of social media. You are informed, you are understanding the very bad side of that technology coin. And we have to ensure that we have an informed and engaged process as we enter into this unknown charted territory. So for me, it is about the guardrails, absolutely. And how do we create those? And how do we ensure that? And where is that leadership going to come from? And I look and I am disheartened when we have got approaches coming out of the US which are consciously and deliberately deleting gender, deleting those policies. But not just the government that's doing that. The tech firms are also following suit. And not just the tech firms, other major international corporations are following suit. How is that going to create the policies that we need to create in this space? So I am losing a little bit of confidence that the leadership will come in that space, in that area. But where I do have confidence is in our future generation. Why? Because you're going to have to live with this technology more than I have to. And you understand it better already today. And it is up to you to really drive this forward and ensure that we can move into a space that the technology really works for you. And this is where I think, for me, as an activist, I think the grassroots movement is really important. We need to speak and participate. Let's use technology as a platform to have these conversations, to have these debates and say, we want to look at this in a different way. It is not acceptable. We don't need the regulations always. There can be companies and organisations that stand up and say, this is the standard I am going to live up to. This is what I am going to adhere to. So how do we move into that space and how do we... So don't feel disempowered. Feel empowered, because technology does give you those tools to garner that support, to change that movement and drive that forward. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's give it up for all of our debaters today. Just one more round of applause, because you have given us an enriching perspective. It's been a great lunch break for all of us to be here. And again, a big congratulations for really changing how the Geneva Gender Debates are. Now, to conclude, for the 6th annual Geneva Gender Debate, we have a virtual closing from Martin Chagong, and he is the Secretary General of the Inter-Parliamentary Union and Chair of the International Gender Champions Global Board.
Dear fellow champions, dear guests, dear friends, as we conclude this year's Geneva Gender Debate, I want to express my sincere gratitude to each of you for your presence, engagement, and thought-provoking contributions. This annual debate serves as a platform for dynamic and informed discussion. It reminds us that progress is not built on agreement alone, but also on the ability to challenge perspectives, critically assess opportunities and risks, and learn from one another. At a time when gender equality is facing significant pushback on multiple fronts, through legislative rollbacks, the spread of misinformation, and growing resistance to inclusive policies, engaging in constructive dialogue is more crucial than ever. We cannot afford to be complacent over the progress we have made over decades. Without robust action, the digital transformation could become another arena where inequalities are reinforced rather than dismantled. We must remain vigilant, proactive, and committed to ensuring that digital and new emerging technologies are leveraged to empower rather than exclude. I want to thank our debaters for their sharp insights and compelling arguments, which have enriched our understanding of the challenges and opportunities ahead. A warm thank you also to our excellent moderator. And of course, my heartfelt gratitude to the organizers of this event, our valued partners at the Geneva Graduate Institute, and the dedicated team at the International Gender Champions Secretariat for making this event, this important conversation possible. Let us leave today's event with a renewed commitment to building a world that is inclusive and safe for all, both online and offline. Whether through policy, advocacy, education, or innovation, each of us has a role to play in shaping a future where technology serves as a true catalyst for gender equality. Thank you for your attention.
All right. Thank you again for everyone for coming, for joining us. Thank you for the speakers. Some of you have already been taking pictures and have been documenting with us. I would love to invite you to also follow both the Graduate Institute as well as the International Gender Champions. Their handles are here, and we also have a hashtag for today, which is, we have one here, the international hashtag INT Gender Champions. All right, thank you very much.